what we really had going here is we had a deep spiral dynamics stage blue. And if you don't know what that is, go watch my spiral dynamics series starting with stage blue. We had spiral dynamics stage blue, then Nietzsche came along and he was sort of at the forefront of stage orange, which we would say is modernity. So Christianity gave rise, after Christianity exhausted itself, and it became untenable, after enough scientific discoveries, after Darwin, after evolution, after Einstein, after quantum mechanics, after all these sorts of things, after electricity and so on, Christianity basically became untenable for serious intellectuals, which led to a sort of nihilism. But then that nihilism very quickly was replaced with scientific materialism and the sort of mechanistic, pragmatic approach, which is stage orange. And this was both good and bad. It was good in the sense that we shed a lot of superstition, dogma, theocracy, and very narrow ethnocentric thinking from the past. We put an end to holy wars and religious domination of others. We got rid of this idea that Christianity is the one true worldview and that all other ones are heathen and need to be converted either by sword or by evangelical proselytization. That's a mouthful. So we got over that, then came a sort of a period of brief nihilism, but that nihilism, that void, the problem is that nature abhors a vacuum, as they say, and that void quickly gets filled up with the worldview of scientific materialism. To the point where today, people born today into the scientific materialist worldview, they can't even imagine that there used to be previous worldviews, that our ancestors and scientists and intellectuals of the past, for example, had idealist worldviews rather than materialist ones, or Christian worldviews. And they took those worldviews just as seriously as you take your materialism. So, and then with materialism came sort of a pragmatic approach to reality. Like if there's no higher order values, if there is no God and anything is allowed, basically, and we're living in a sort of a moral relativistic landscape, then what is life about then? Life is not about worshiping or going to church or working towards some beautiful afterlife or heaven or working to avoid the eternal damnation of hell, which is what life was for people for thousands of years. In Europe, for example. Now life is just about what? It's about material acquisition. It's just about carnal pleasure, personal comfort, success, as much money and sex as I can get, the business that I can build, the science that I can do, and just being practical and normal, having fun. It becomes about that. And that seems like, well, that's a much better way to live. Well, in a certain way it is, in a certain sense. But in another certain sense, it's a very hollow existence. And this is where someone like Jordan Peterson would come in and say, if you take that too far, your life just becomes about work and money, and you lose touch of something higher than you. You lose the spiritual component. And then, in a sense, that is this sort of nihilism or this lack of direction in your life. And then because of that, society becomes dysfunctional. You as an individual become dysfunctional. Because there's actually something deeply important that was there in the old traditions that is missing from this purely pragmatic, materialistic way of living. So we need to go back to the old myths and stories and extract the wisdom and lessons of our ancestors. And then, of course, after stage orange, like in the 1950s and 60s, then came stage green, came online. And green was even more relativistic. And it not only was it, so far we've been talking about modernity, but then it went even beyond that into post-modernity. And then there was a lot of very deep questioning of all morals and even cultural norms. Like, what does it even mean to be a man or a woman? Even that started to be questioned. Is heterosexuality even correct? Even that became questioned. And basically with stage green, the relativistic stage, all the remaining foundations of Western civilization were undermined. There was a loss of this sort of simplistic top-down authority, not just of religion, which already happened with modernity, but now even with science. So see, a lot of what sort of normies don't like about postmodernism is that postmodernism doesn't just question the old traditions of the ancestors. It goes a step further. It questions modernity, the idea of an objective reality, the idea that physics is the one true interpretation and explanation for what reality is. Postmodernity questions that. And a lot of folks in the hard sciences don't like this because they like the authority they have of the hard sciences. They want to say, no. Yeah, this postmodernism stuff, this is just from the soft sciences. These people, they're just kind of philosophers and social critics. But what they're talking about, this relativism, sure, maybe there's a relativism of different cultures, of morals and norms. A hard scientist would acknowledge that. And maybe, Western civilization is not the best civilization. Maybe there's value in Eastern civilization, in the Middle Eastern civilization, and all this. Okay, we'll admit that. But let's protect the foundation of science, the hard sciences, physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics, and logic. These cannot be questioned because these are the deepest source of truth in our society. They produce all of our technology. Look, we landed a man on the moon. Look at the satellites we launch. Look at the rockets we have. Look at the nuclear weapons we have. You can't deny that that is real. It's tangible. You can't just say that's relative. And so biology truly does say that there's a man and there's a woman, and this is based on DNA evidence. And a postmodernist would say, no, even that is just a limited and biased way of looking at the world. And it is not the absolute truth, and it is not the most important and the most objective. And so postmodernists, for example, would level critiques even at the hard sciences by saying stuff like, well, most of the hard sciences have been done by privileged white men for centuries, for millennia. And that presents a very certain biased view of the physical world. For example, when women do science, they might have a different way of looking at the world. They might have a different epistemology, a different metaphysics, a different emphasis on what's important to look at. Because it's not just that you're looking at the physical world as it is. Really what you're doing is you're cherry picking data and facts. You're running certain kinds of experiments, but then it's you who's determining what kind of experiments are worthwhile to run and how to interpret the data and how to frame the data and what it means. And then how to decide what kind of society to structure based upon that data. What kind of normative rules and guidelines to give to people in a society. Now, of course, the hard scientists, they're at stage orange, they're stuck in stage orange, and so they will debate that. And so now we have a debate between orange and green. And I'm not going to go too deeply into that here because you can debate that for hours. There's valid points to be made on both sides. But in general, stage green is above stage orange. And if you move to green properly in a solid way, and you also integrate orange as you move to green, then you should still be able to retain the truths of orange, the partial truths of orange, and then transcend them with green.